The morning sun shone brightly through the kitchen window of the Thompson house on Maple Street. Rebecca Thompson stood at the counter making coffee, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. To anyone watching, she looked like the perfect suburban wife. But the smile on her face was fake, and her hands shook slightly as she poured the hot coffee into 2 white mugs. Michael Thompson sat at the kitchen table reading his newspaper. He was a big man with dark hair and strong hands from years of construction work. At 45 years old, he still looked healthy and strong. He had no idea that his 12-year marriage was about to become a nightmare. The Thompson house looked perfect from the outside. It was a 2-story home with a white fence and a green lawn. The neighbors always said what a lovely couple they were. Rebecca worked at the dental office downtown, and Michael supervised construction crews around Denver. They seemed to have everything together, but inside the house things were very different. Rebecca had been angry for months. The money problems kept getting worse. Michael spent too much money on beer and went to bars after work. Sometimes he came home very late and Rebecca could smell alcohol on his breath. She tried to talk to him about it, but he would just walk away or turn on the television. The biggest problem started 3 months ago, when Rebecca found text messages on Michael's phone. They were from a woman named Lisa who worked with Michael. The messages were not the kind that friends send to each other. Rebecca realized that Michael was having an affair. When she asked Michael about Lisa, he got very angry. He said Rebecca was being crazy and jealous. He said the messages meant nothing. But Rebecca knew he was lying. She could see it in his eyes. After that day, Rebecca started to hate Michael. She would watch him eat his breakfast and think about how much she wanted him gone. She was tired of his drinking. She was tired of his lies. She was tired of pretending to be happy. Michael did not know how angry Rebecca was. He thought she was just going through a difficult time. He kept texting Lisa and meeting her after work. He thought Rebecca would get over it and things would go back to normal. But Rebecca was making different plans. She started looking at their life insurance papers. Michael had a policy worth $200,000. If something happened to him, Rebecca would get all the money. She could pay off their debts and start a new life. At first, Rebecca just thought about it. She would imagine being free and having money to do whatever she wanted. But then the thoughts became more serious. She started thinking about how it could actually happen. Rebecca was smart. She had always been good at solving problems. At the dental office, she helped organize everything and kept track of all the details. Now she was using those same skills to think about getting rid of Michael. She could not just leave him. If they got divorced, she would have to give him half of everything. She would still have debts and she would have to find a new place to live. That was not what she wanted. Rebecca started spending time on her computer at night after Michael went to sleep. She would search for information about different things. She read about poisons and accidents and ways that people died. She was careful to delete her search history every time. Michael noticed that Rebecca was acting strange. She was quieter than usual and spent a lot of time on her computer. When he asked her what she was doing, she said she was just reading news or shopping online. He did not think much about it. The fighting between them got worse. They would argue about money, about Michael's drinking, and about Lisa. Rebecca would say mean things to hurt Michael. She told him he was a failure and that she was sorry she married him. Michael would get angry and sometimes slam doors or throw things. One night in May, they had their worst fight ever. Michael came home at midnight and Rebecca was waiting for him in the kitchen. She could smell beer and perfume on him. She knew he had been with Lisa. Rebecca started screaming at Michael. She said she knew about his affair and that she hated him. Michael tried to deny it, but then he got angry too. He said maybe he would be happier with Lisa. He said Rebecca was cold and mean and that Lisa made him feel good. Those words hurt Rebecca more than anything else Michael had ever said. She felt like he had hit her. That night she decided that Michael had to die. The next morning, Rebecca acted normal. She made Michael's coffee and kissed him goodbye when he left for work. But inside, she was making plans. Rebecca started watching Michael more carefully. She learned his daily routine. She knew what time he woke up, what he ate for breakfast, and when he came home from work. She knew he always drank beer while watching television at night. She also started being nicer to Michael. She would smile more and ask about his work. She would make his favorite dinner and sit with him while he watched sports. Michael thought Rebecca was trying to fix their marriage. He had no idea she was studying him like a science experiment. Rebecca was patient. She knew she had to be very careful. If she made any mistakes, she could go to prison. She needed a plan that would work perfectly. She thought about different ways to hurt Michael. She could not use a gun or a knife because that would be too obvious. She could not poison his food with something that would show up in tests. She needed something that would look like natural causes. Rebecca spent weeks researching and planning. She read about heart attacks and strokes and other medical problems. She learned about symptoms and how doctors would test for different things. Finally, she found what she was looking for. It was something simple and easy to get. Something that would not show up in normal medical tests. Something that could kill Michael slowly, and no one would know it was murder. Rebecca smiled as she closed her computer. Soon, all her problems would be over. Michael would be gone, she would have the insurance money, and she could start her new life. She had no idea that her plan would eventually destroy her own life instead. Rebecca Thompson had been giving Michael eye drops in his food for 3 weeks now. Every morning she would add a few drops to his coffee. Every evening, she would put some in his dinner. Michael was getting sicker and sicker, and Rebecca was getting more confident with her plan. She had learned exactly how much to use. Too little, and Michael would just feel a bit sick. Too much, and he might die too quickly, which could make doctors suspicious. Rebecca wanted Michael to die slowly, like he was getting a natural disease. Michael had lost a lot of weight. His face was pale, and he moved slowly around the house. He could barely eat anything without feeling sick. Sometimes he would try to go to work, but he would come home early because he felt too weak. Rebecca pretended to be very worried about her husband. She would hold his hand and tell him everything would be okay. She would make him soup and bring him medicine for his stomach. She even bought him vitamins and told him they would help him feel better. At night, Rebecca would lie in bed next to Michael and listen to his breathing. Sometimes it was very slow and quiet. Other times, his heart would beat so fast that she could feel the bed shaking. She would smile in the darkness, knowing that her plan was working perfectly. Michael trusted Rebecca completely. He never thought that his wife could be making him sick. When Rebecca brought him food or drinks, he would thank her and tell her she was taking good care of him. He had no idea that every meal was slowly killing him. Rebecca started keeping a notebook where she wrote down everything that happened to Michael. She wrote about his symptoms, what time they happened, and how long they lasted. She told herself this was to help the doctors, but really she was keeping track of her poisoning progress. She wrote things like, Tuesday morning, Michael threw up twice after breakfast. Heart rate very slow. Could not get out of bed until noon. Or, Friday night, Michael could not breathe well, called ambulance. Doctors said his blood pressure was very low. Rebecca became an expert at acting worried and scared. When the ambulance came to their house, she would cry and hold Michael's hand. She would tell the paramedics exactly what symptoms Michael had. She sounded like the perfect caring wife. The doctors at the hospital started to know Rebecca well. She came with Michael every time he went to the emergency room. She would sit beside his bed and ask the doctors many questions. She wanted to know everything about Michael's condition. Dr. Martinez, who was treating Michael, thought Rebecca was one of the most devoted wives he had ever seen. She never missed a doctor appointment. She always had detailed information about Michael's symptoms. She seemed to care so much about helping Michael get better, but Rebecca had different reasons for being so involved. She wanted to make sure the doctors did not figure out what was really wrong with Michael. Every time they did a new test, she would worry that they might find the eye drops in his blood. Rebecca also needed to know how close Michael was to dying. If the doctors said he was getting better, she would need to give him more poison. If they said he was getting worse too quickly, she might need to slow down. Michael's co-workers at the construction site were very worried about him. He had always been a strong, healthy man who worked hard every day. Now he could barely lift heavy tools. Sometimes he would get dizzy and have to sit down. His boss, Tom, called Rebecca several times to check on Michael. Tom said Michael was a good worker, and they wanted him to take all the time he needed to get better. Rebecca would thank Tom and say the doctors were still trying to figure out what was wrong. Rebecca started to enjoy the attention she was getting. People at work would ask about Michael and tell her what a good wife she was. The neighbors would bring food and offer to help with anything she needed. Everyone felt sorry for Rebecca because her husband was so sick. She also enjoyed having control over Michael. For years, he had been the one making decisions about money and their life. He had cheated on her and made her feel powerless. Now she controlled whether he lived or died, and he did not even know it. Rebecca started planning what she would do after Michael died. She looked at apartments in different parts of the city. She thought about quitting her job and maybe going back to school. With the insurance money, she could do anything she wanted. But Michael was taking longer to die than Rebecca had expected. She had thought it would take maybe a month or two. Now it had been almost 3 months, and Michael was still alive. He was very sick, but he was not dying. Rebecca decided she needed to use more eye drops. She started putting them in Michael's beer at night. She would wait until he was watching television, then go to the kitchen and add the drops to a fresh beer. Michael never noticed anything different about the taste. She also started giving him eye drops in his lunch when she packed it for work. She would make him a sandwich and add a few drops to his drink. By the time Michael ate his lunch at the construction site, the poison was already working. Michael's health got much worse after Rebecca increased the amount of poison. He started having problems with his heart that scared even Rebecca. Sometimes his heart would stop beating normally, and he would collapse on the floor. One night, Michael's heart rate dropped so low that Rebecca thought he was going to die right there in their living room. She called 911 and tried to act like a panicked wife. But inside, she was excited that her plan was finally working. The paramedics were able to save Michael that night, but he had to stay in the hospital for a week. Rebecca visited him every day and brought him flowers. She would sit by his bed and hold his hand while planning his funeral in her mind. Rebecca was confident that no one would ever figure out what she was doing. She was being very careful, and the doctors had no idea what was making Michael sick. Soon, she thought, Michael would die, and she would be free and rich. She had no idea that someone was starting to watch her very carefully. Rebecca Thompson had been giving Michael eye drops in his food for 3 weeks now. Every morning, she would add a few drops to his coffee. Every evening, she would put some in his dinner. Michael was getting sicker and sicker, and Rebecca was getting more confident with her plan. She had learned exactly how much to use. Too little, and Michael would just feel a bit sick. Too much, and he might die too quickly, which could make doctors suspicious. Rebecca wanted Michael to die slowly, like he was getting a natural disease. Michael had lost a lot of weight. His face was pale, and he moved slowly around the house. He could barely eat anything without feeling sick. Sometimes he would try to go to work, but he would come home early because he felt too weak. Rebecca pretended to be very worried about her husband. She would hold his hand and tell him everything would be okay. She would make him soup and bring him medicine for his stomach. She even bought him vitamins and told him they would help him feel better. At night, Rebecca would lie in bed next to Michael and listen to his breathing. Sometimes it was very slow and quiet. Other times his heart would beat so fast that she could feel the bed shaking. She would smile in the darkness, knowing that her plan was working perfectly. Michael trusted Rebecca completely. He never thought that his wife could be making him sick. When Rebecca brought him food or drinks, he would thank her and tell her she was taking good care of him. He had no idea that every meal was slowly killing him. Rebecca started keeping a notebook where she wrote down everything that happened to Michael. She wrote about his symptoms, what time they happened, and how long they lasted. She told herself this was to help the doctors, but really she was keeping track of her poisoning progress. She wrote things like, Tuesday morning, Michael threw up twice after breakfast. Heart rate very slow. Could not get out of bed until noon. Or, Friday night, Michael could not breathe well. Called ambulance. Doctors said his blood pressure was very low. Rebecca became an expert at acting worried and scared. When the ambulance came to their house, she would cry and hold Michael's hand. She would tell the paramedics exactly what symptoms Michael had. She sounded like the perfect caring wife. The doctors at the hospital started to know Rebecca well. She came with Michael every time he went to the emergency room. She would sit beside his bed and ask the doctors many questions. She wanted to know everything about Michael's condition. Dr. Martinez, who was treating Michael, thought Rebecca was one of the most devoted wives he had ever seen. She never missed a doctor appointment. She always had detailed information about Michael's symptoms. She seemed to care so much about helping Michael get better. But Rebecca had different reasons for being so involved. She wanted to make sure the doctors did not figure out what was really wrong with Michael. Every time they did a new test, she would worry that they might find the eye drops in his blood. Rebecca also needed to know how close Michael was to dying. If the doctors said he was getting better, she would need to give him more poison. If they said he was getting worse too quickly, she might need to slow down. Michael's co-workers at the construction site were very worried about him. He had always been a strong, healthy man who worked hard every day. Now he could barely lift heavy tools. Sometimes he would get dizzy and have to sit down. His boss, Tom, called Rebecca several times to check on Michael. Tom said Michael was a good worker, and they wanted him to take all the time he needed to get better. Rebecca would thank Tom and say the doctors were still trying to figure out what was wrong. Rebecca started to enjoy the attention she was getting. People at work would ask about Michael and tell her what a good wife she was. The neighbors would bring food and offer to help with anything she needed. Everyone felt sorry for Rebecca because her husband was so sick. She also enjoyed having control over Michael. For years, he had been the one making decisions about money and their life. He had cheated on her and made her feel powerless. Now she controlled whether he lived or died, and he did not even know it. Rebecca started planning what she would do after Michael died. She looked at apartments in different parts of the city. She thought about quitting her job and maybe going back to school. With the insurance money, she could do anything she wanted. But Michael was taking longer to die than Rebecca had expected. She had thought it would take maybe a month or two. Now it had been almost 3 months, and Michael was still alive. He was very sick, but he was not dying. Rebecca decided she needed to use more eye drops. She started putting them in Michael's beer at night. She would wait until he was watching television, then go to the kitchen and add the drops to a fresh beer. Michael never noticed anything different about the taste. She also started giving him eye drops in his lunch when she packed it for work. She would make him a sandwich and add a few drops to his drink. By the time Michael ate his lunch at the construction site, the poison was already working. Michael's health got much worse after Rebecca increased the amount of poison. He started having problems with his heart that scared even Rebecca. Sometimes his heart would stop beating normally and he would collapse on the floor. One night, Michael's heart rate dropped so low that Rebecca thought he was going to die right there in their living room. She called 911 and tried to act like a panicked wife. But inside, she was excited that her plan was finally working. The paramedics were able to save Michael that night, but he had to stay in the hospital for a week. Rebecca visited him every day and brought him flowers. She would sit by his bed and hold his hand while planning his funeral in her mind. Rebecca was confident that no one would ever figure out what she was doing. She was being very careful, and the doctors had no idea what was making Michael sick. Soon she thought Michael would die, and she would be free and rich. She had no idea that someone was starting to watch her very carefully. Jennifer Thompson had always been close to her older brother Michael. They talked on the phone every week and saw each other for family dinners once a month. When Michael started getting sick, Jennifer was very worried about him. But as the weeks went by, she started to notice some strange things. Jennifer was a nurse at Denver General Hospital. She had seen many sick people, and something about Michael's illness did not seem right to her. The symptoms kept changing, and the doctors could not find any clear cause. Michael would get very sick at home, but then feel a little better when he was in the hospital. The first time Jennifer became suspicious was during a family dinner in July. Michael had been sick for about 2 months, and he looked terrible. He was thin and pale, and he could barely eat the food on his plate. Rebecca kept bringing him different things to drink and asking if he needed anything. Jennifer watched Rebecca very carefully that night. She noticed that Rebecca seemed almost happy when Michael felt sick. When Michael had to run to the bathroom to throw up, Rebecca had a small smile on her face. It was just for a second, but Jennifer saw it. After dinner, Jennifer talked to her husband David about what she had seen. David said maybe Rebecca was just stressed from taking care of Michael. But Jennifer could not stop thinking about Rebecca's strange behavior. A few days later, Jennifer called Michael to check on him. He told her he had been feeling a little better when he stayed at their friend's house for 2 days while Rebecca was out of town visiting her sister. But as soon as he got home and started eating Rebecca's food again, he got sick. Jennifer asked Michael if he thought there could be something wrong with the food or water in their house. Maybe there was a gas leak or some kind of contamination. Michael said the doctors had already checked for those things and everything was normal. But Jennifer kept thinking about the timing. Michael always seemed to get sicker after eating meals that Rebecca prepared. When he ate at restaurants or at other people's houses, he felt better. Jennifer decided to do some research. She spent hours on her computer reading about different poisons and toxins. She learned about symptoms that matched what Michael was experiencing. She read about cases where people had been poisoned by family members. One night, Jennifer found information about a poison that could cause exactly the symptoms Michael had. It was something called tetrahydrozoline. It was found in eye drops that people could buy at any drugstore. When someone drank tetrahydrozoline, it could cause vomiting, low blood pressure, slow heart rate, and breathing problems. These were exactly the symptoms Michael had been having. The best part for someone trying to poison another person was that most doctors would not test for this poison unless they had a specific reason to look for it. Jennifer was shocked. She realized that Rebecca might be slowly killing Michael with eye drops. At first, she could not believe her own thoughts. Rebecca was Michael's wife. She was supposed to love him and protect him, but the more Jennifer thought about it, the more sense it made. Rebecca and Michael had been having problems in their marriage. Jennifer knew about Michael's affair because he had told her about it months ago. She also knew that Rebecca was angry about money problems. Jennifer decided she had to find out if Rebecca was really poisoning Michael, but she could not just accuse Rebecca without proof. If she was wrong, it would destroy the family. If she was right but could not prove it, Rebecca might hurt Michael even more. Jennifer talked to David about her suspicions. David was shocked, but he agreed that the timing was very suspicious. They decided they needed to find a way to watch Rebecca without her knowing. Jennifer called Michael and told him she was worried about his safety. She did not tell him she suspected Rebecca. Instead, she said she was concerned that someone might be breaking into their house and putting something harmful in their food or water. Jennifer convinced Michael to let her install a small hidden camera in the kitchen. She told him it would help them figure out if there was any contamination or if someone was coming into the house when they were not there. Michael agreed, because he trusted his sister. He was so sick and confused that he was willing to try anything to figure out what was wrong with him. He did not tell Rebecca about the camera, because Jennifer asked him to keep it secret until they found out what was happening. Jennifer bought a tiny camera that looked like a smoke detector. David helped her install it in Michael's kitchen when Rebecca was at work. The camera could record everything that happened in the kitchen and send the video to Jennifer's computer. For the first few days, the camera did not show anything unusual. Rebecca would make normal meals and drinks for Michael, but Jennifer kept watching and she told Michael to pay attention to when he felt sicker. On the 4th day, the camera captured something shocking. The video showed Rebecca in the kitchen, early in the morning making Michael's coffee. She took a small bottle out of her purse and carefully added several drops to his coffee mug. Then she stirred the coffee and put the bottle back in her purse. Jennifer watched the video 3 times to make sure she was seeing it correctly. There was no doubt about what Rebecca was doing. She was putting something from a small bottle into Michael's coffee. Jennifer called the police that same day. She showed the video to Detective Lisa Rodriguez, who worked on domestic violence cases. Detective Rodriguez had seen cases like this before, and she knew how serious it could be. The detective told Jennifer that they needed to be very careful. If Rebecca found out they were investigating her, she might try to hurt Michael more quickly. They needed to gather more evidence before they could arrest Rebecca. Detective Rodriguez assigned officers to watch Rebecca secretly. They followed her when she went shopping and took pictures of everything she bought. They discovered that Rebecca had been buying eye drops from many different stores around the city. The detective also got a court order to check Rebecca's computer. They found her internet search history, which she thought she had deleted. Rebecca had searched for information about poisons, undetectable ways to kill someone, and symptoms of different toxic substances. Detective Rodriguez knew they had enough evidence to arrest Rebecca, but first, they needed to get Michael to safety and test his blood for the poison. Jennifer called Michael and told him he needed to come to her house right away. She said it was an emergency, but she could not explain over the phone. Michael was confused, but he trusted his sister. When Michael got to Jennifer's house, she showed him the video of Rebecca putting drops in his coffee. Michael could not believe what he was seeing. At first, he thought there must be some mistake, but as Jennifer explained everything she had discovered, Michael started to understand. His own wife had been slowly poisoning him for months. The woman he had shared a bed with every night had been trying to kill him. Michael felt sick, but this time it was not from poison. It was from the shock of learning that the person he trusted most in the world had been betraying him in the worst possible way. Detective Rodriguez arrived at Jennifer's house with several other officers. They told Michael he was safe now and they were going to arrest Rebecca. But first, they needed to get him to the hospital to test his blood and make sure he was going to be okay. As they drove to the hospital, Michael kept thinking about all the times Rebecca had held his hand in the emergency room. All the times she had brought him food and medicine. All the times she had told him she loved him and wanted him to get better. Now he knew that every kind gesture had been a lie. Every time she had comforted him, she was actually the one causing his pain. Michael realized that if Jennifer had not figured out what was happening, he would probably be dead within a few weeks. The doctors at the hospital found high levels of tetrahydrozoline in Michael's blood and hair samples. They said he was lucky to be alive. If the poisoning had continued much longer, it could have caused permanent damage to his heart and brain. While Michael was at the hospital, Detective Rodriguez and her team went to arrest Rebecca Thompson. They had enough evidence to charge her with attempted murder, and they were confident they could prove their case in court. Rebecca had no idea that her secret plan had been discovered. She thought she was still the perfect, caring wife, and that Michael would be dead soon. She was about to learn that her crime had been caught on camera, and her life was about to change forever. Rebecca Thompson was at work at the dental office when Detective Rodriguez and two other police officers walked through the front door. It was a busy Thursday afternoon, and Rebecca was cleaning dental instruments in the back room. She had no idea that her world was about to collapse. The receptionist, Maria, called Rebecca to the front desk. Rebecca walked out with a smile, thinking maybe someone needed help with their appointment. When she saw the police officers, her smile disappeared. Detective Rodriguez showed Rebecca her badge and said they needed to talk to her about her husband, Michael. Rebecca tried to look worried and asked if something had happened to Michael. She was still playing the role of the caring wife. Detective Rodriguez told Rebecca she was under arrest for the attempted murder of Michael Thompson. Rebecca's face went completely white. She started shaking and said there must be some mistake. She said she would never hurt Michael and that she had been trying to help him get better. The other people in the dental office could not believe what they were hearing. Rebecca had always talked about how much she loved Michael and how worried she was about his illness. Dr. Wilson, Rebecca's boss, watched in shock as the officers put handcuffs on Rebecca. Rebecca kept saying she was innocent as they led her to the police car. She said the police were making a terrible mistake and that she needed to call her lawyer. Some of her co-workers came outside to watch as Rebecca was driven away in the back of the police car. At the police station, Detective Rodriguez put Rebecca in a small room with a table and two chairs. There was a camera recording everything that happened. Rebecca sat with her hands folded, trying to look calm, but her hands were still shaking. Detective Rodriguez came into the room with a folder full of evidence. She told Rebecca that they had video proof of her putting poison in Michael's food. Rebecca said that was impossible because she had never done such a thing. Then Detective Rodriguez showed Rebecca the video from the hidden camera. Rebecca watched, herself taking the small bottle out of her purse and adding drops to Michael's coffee. Her face turned red and she started to cry. Rebecca said the video was not real, that someone had made it look like she was poisoning Michael. She said maybe someone had broken into her house and was trying to frame her for a crime she did not commit. Detective Rodriguez then showed Rebecca the evidence of all the eye drops she had bought from different stores around the city. The detective had receipts and security camera footage of Rebecca buying the same type of eye drops many times. Rebecca could not explain why she needed so many bottles of eye drops. She said maybe she had lost some bottles or forgotten that she already had some at home. Her explanations did not make sense, and Detective Rodriguez could tell she was lying. The detective also showed Rebecca the computer evidence. She had found all of Rebecca's internet searches about poisons and ways to kill people without being caught. Rebecca tried to say she was just reading about those things because she was curious, not because she was planning to hurt anyone. Detective Rodriguez told Rebecca that Michael's blood tests showed he had been poisoned with tetrahydrozoline, which is found in eye drops. She said the doctors confirmed that Michael could have died if the poisoning had continued. After seeing all the evidence, Rebecca finally stopped lying. She started to cry harder and said she never meant for things to go so far. She said she was just angry about Michael's affair and their money problems. She said she felt trapped and did not know what else to do. Rebecca told Detective Rodriguez that she started with just a little bit of eye drops to make Michael sick. She thought maybe he would get sick enough to learn a lesson about cheating on her. But when she saw how well it was working, she kept doing it more and more. She said she liked feeling like she had control over Michael for once. She said he had made her feel powerless for years, and this was her way of getting back at him. She admitted that she had thought about the life insurance money and how she could start a new life if Michael died. Detective Rodriguez asked Rebecca if she understood that she had almost killed her husband. Rebecca nodded and said she knew it was wrong, but she could not stop herself once she started. The detective charged Rebecca with attempted murder in the first degree, assault with a deadly weapon, and domestic violence. Because she had planned the poisoning for months and had tried to kill Michael slowly, the charges were very serious. Rebecca's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, tried to argue that she was having a mental breakdown and did not understand what she was doing. He said the stress of Michael's affair and their financial problems had made her temporarily insane. But the prosecutor, Ms. Johnson, showed that Rebecca's actions were very well planned and organized. She had researched different poisons, bought supplies from multiple stores to avoid suspicion, and kept detailed records of Michael's symptoms. This proved that Rebecca knew exactly what she was doing. The case became famous in Denver and around the country. Newspapers wrote stories about the woman who tried to kill her husband with eye drops. Television news programs talked about how common household items could be used as weapons. Many people could not understand how a wife could slowly poison her husband over many months. Some people felt sorry for Rebecca and thought she must have been very desperate. Other people thought she was evil and should go to prison for the rest of her life. Michael had to testify at Rebecca's trial. It was very hard for him to sit in the same room as the woman who had tried to kill him. He told the jury about all the times he had been rushed to the hospital and how scared he was when he could not breathe. He said the worst part was realizing that Rebecca had been lying to him every day. When she brought him soup or held his hand in the hospital, she was just pretending to care. She was actually happy that he was dying. Jennifer also testified about how she became suspicious of Rebecca. She told the jury about the hidden camera and how shocked she was to see her brother's wife poisoning him. She said she was grateful she had trusted her instincts because Michael would probably be dead if she had not investigated. The doctors who treated Michael testified about how close he came to dying. They said his heart and other organs had been seriously damaged by the poison. They said if the poisoning had continued for a few more weeks, Michael would not have survived. Expert witnesses explained to the jury how tetrahydrozoline works and why it is so dangerous. They said many people do not realize that eye drops can be deadly if someone drinks them. They said Rebecca had chosen a very clever poison because most doctors would not think to test for it. The trial lasted for 3 weeks. Rebecca's lawyer tried to convince the jury that she was a victim of domestic abuse who had been driven to desperate actions. He said Michael's affair and drinking had pushed Rebecca to a mental breaking point. But the prosecutor showed that Rebecca had many other options. She could have gotten divorced, called the police about domestic violence, or gotten counseling for their marriage problems. Instead, she chose to slowly murder her husband to get his insurance money. The jury listened to all the evidence and watched the video of Rebecca poisoning Michael's coffee. They saw the receipts for all the eye drops she bought and read about her internet searches for information about killing people. After 2 days of discussions, the jury decided that Rebecca was guilty of all the charges. The judge set a date for her sentencing, where she would learn how many years she would spend in prison. Rebecca sat in her jail cell waiting for sentencing, thinking about how her plan had failed completely. Instead of getting rid of Michael and starting a new life with insurance money, she was going to prison. Michael was still alive and everyone knew what she had tried to do. She realized that her anger and greed had destroyed her life. If she had just divorced Michael or tried to work on their marriage, she would still be free. Now she would spend many years in prison, and she would always be known as the woman who tried to kill her husband with eye drops. The courtroom was completely silent as Judge Williams prepared to announce Rebecca Thompson's sentence. It was a cold morning in March 2020, almost 8 months after Rebecca's arrest. Michael sat in the front row with his sister Jennifer, waiting to hear how many years his wife would spend in prison for trying to kill him. Rebecca stood next to her lawyer, wearing an orange jail uniform. She looked much different than she had during her trial. Her blonde hair was shorter now and she had dark circles under her eyes from months of sleeping in a jail cell. She kept her head down, not wanting to look at Michael or anyone else in the courtroom. Judge Williams had been a judge for 25 years, and he had seen many terrible crimes. But this case was especially disturbing to him. Rebecca had not killed Michael in a moment of anger or during a fight. She had slowly poisoned him every day for months, watching him suffer and pretending to care about him. The judge looked directly at Rebecca as he spoke. He said that her crime was one of the most cruel and calculated he had ever seen. He said Rebecca had violated the most basic trust between husband and wife. She had used Michael's love for her to slowly murder him. Judge Williams said that Rebecca's actions could have killed Michael and that she had caused him permanent damage to his heart and other organs. He said the evidence showed that Rebecca had planned everything very carefully and had enjoyed having power over Michael's life and death. The judge sentenced Rebecca Thompson to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. This meant Rebecca would have to serve the full 25 years before she could be released. She would be almost 70 years old when she got out of prison. Rebecca started crying when she heard the sentence. Her lawyer put his hand on her shoulder, but there was nothing more he could do for her. The bailiff came forward to take Rebecca back to her cell. As she was led away, she looked at Michael for the first time during the sentencing. Michael stared back at her but did not show any emotion. After Rebecca was taken away, Michael walked outside the courthouse with Jennifer and David. Reporters were waiting to ask him questions about how he felt about the sentence. Michael was not used to talking to reporters, but he wanted people to know what Rebecca had done to him. Michael told the reporters that he was glad Rebecca would be in prison for a long time. He said she had not only tried to kill him, but she had also destroyed his ability to trust other people. He said he still had nightmares about all the times Rebecca had brought him food or drinks that were poisoned. He also wanted people to understand how dangerous common items like eye drops could be. Michael said he never knew that something you could buy at any store could be used to kill someone. He hoped other people would learn from his case and be more aware of the dangers. Jennifer spoke to the reporters too. She said she was proud that she had trusted her instincts and investigated when something seemed wrong. She told other family members to pay attention if someone they loved was getting sick in an unusual way, especially if the illness did not make sense to doctors. Michael's recovery from the poisoning was slow and difficult. The doctors told him that the tetrahydrozoline had caused permanent damage to his cardiovascular system. His heart did not work as well as it used to, and he got tired much more easily than before. Michael had to take several medications every day to help his heart function properly. He also had to see a cardiologist every few months to make sure his condition was not getting worse. The doctors said he might need more serious treatment in the future, including possible surgery. The emotional recovery was even harder than the physical recovery. Michael had to see a therapist to help him deal with what Rebecca had done to him. He had trouble sleeping and would often wake up in the middle of the night thinking about how close he had come to dying. Michael also had to learn how to trust people again. For months after Rebecca's arrest, he was afraid to eat or drink anything that someone else had prepared. He would only eat food that he had made himself or that came in sealed packages from stores. Even visiting restaurants was difficult for Michael. He would watch the servers and kitchen staff carefully, wondering if someone might try to poison him. His therapist helped him understand that most people were not dangerous, but it took a long time for Michael to feel safe again. 3 months after Rebecca's sentencing, Michael decided to move to a different state. He could not stand living in the same house where Rebecca had poisoned him every day. He also wanted to get away from all the reporters and people who recognized him from the news stories about the case. Michael sold the house on Maple Street and moved to Arizona, where he had a cousin who offered to help him start over. He found a job with a construction company in Phoenix and rented a small apartment near the mountains. The change of scenery was good for Michael. The warm weather helped him feel better physically, and being around new people helped him focus on moving forward instead of thinking about the past. He slowly started to trust people again and even began dating after a year in Arizona. The case had a big impact on medical professionals around the country. Doctors and nurses learned about the symptoms of tetrahydrozoline poisoning and were trained to look for it when patients had unexplained illnesses. Several medical schools began teaching about household poisons that could be used to hurt people. Pharmacies also made changes because of Rebecca's case. Many stores moved eye drops to locations where customers had to ask for help to get them. Some pharmacies started keeping track of customers who bought large amounts of eye drops or other products that could be dangerous. The case was featured in television crime shows and documentaries. People were fascinated and horrified by the idea that a wife could slowly poison her husband with something as common as eye drops. The story was a warning to everyone about how trust could be betrayed in the most terrible ways. Rebecca spent her first year in prison in a cell by herself. Other prisoners had heard about her case, and many of them did not like people who had tried to kill their spouses. Rebecca had to be protected from other inmates who might try to hurt her. She wrote letters to Michael asking for forgiveness, but Michael threw them away without reading them. He did not want any contact with Rebecca ever again. His lawyer had advised him that Rebecca might try to contact him, and Michael had decided he wanted nothing to do with her. As the years passed, the case became a famous example of how ordinary household items could be used as weapons. It was studied in criminal justice classes and used to train police officers about domestic violence cases that involved poisoning. Michael eventually remarried and had a family in Arizona. He never forgot what Rebecca had done to him, but he learned to build a new life based on trust and honesty. He sometimes spoke to groups about domestic violence and the importance of paying attention when something did not seem right. Rebecca remained in prison, serving her 25-year sentence. She had lost everything because of her anger and greed. Instead of getting the insurance money and freedom she had wanted, she got decades in prison and the knowledge that everyone knew what she had tried to do. The case of Rebecca Thompson became a reminder that the most dangerous person in someone's life could be the person they trusted most. It showed that evil could hide behind a smile and a caring act, and that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest.